tell you Eileen will be there Shabbos?
Hold on. I don't want to disturb your class.
It's being recorded though.
I just want to let you know that tonight is Rabbi Chaim's birthday. That's all.
Oh,
Oh,
how
you let it
apropos, how
spare.
apropos. How apropos.
Wonderful.
See?
What a day to have a birthday. That's great.
Thank you for
Apropos.
that. I owe you one now. And well, there's no better way to celebrate than with you guys.
Shall we sing happy birthday?
If you're on key.
We're online.
Glad that Sameach.
Yeah.
Yom
Redek Sameach.
Yom
Redek Sameach.
Yom
Redek Sameach.
Thank you very much. I wanna
Chaim,
wish-
if I was there with you now, I'd give you some of your wife's cake.
Thank you. Thank you. Believe me, I have a lot of it. My mother-in-law's cake.
Yeah.
I carry it with me wherever I go.
Oh, you do. Good. Very good.
Now is that so it's tonight and tomorrow? So it's tonight.
Tomorrow. And
Tomorrow.
tonight, tomorrow.
And
tomorrow's my English birthday too.
he'll announce
What
it.
that means?
Watch, you'll be announced at shul.
Thank you. You know what that means?
What?
Every 19 years, the Hebrew birthday and English birthday fall on the same day again,
Right.
like when you were born.
Very good.
Okay, that's what it means. Every 19 years. So you can figure out the gematrias and the.
Yeah, you gotta figure out your age too.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Okay,
Right, it's 36.
Oh, you and you Jack
19 times 2L is not 36.
I know. 38.
Okay.
It's still Jack Benny.
It's 39.
Yeah, forever.
Oh, let me open up over here. Okay, ready? So now we're on Lech Lecha, section 1, page 57.
Yep. That's correct. You didn't give your spiel.
Okay. Is that big enough for you, Alan?
Yes, but you didn't welcome us too.
What?
You forgot to give the opening spiel.
I thought you meant this spiel. Welcome to the Garden of the Spirit, a class studying apples from the orchard for the second time around. This class meets in Longmeadow, Massachusetts, and is held in memory of Malka Ruth Bas Moshe, Margaret Vogel of blessed memory. Apples from the Orchard contain selections of teachings of Kabbalah from the Arizal, Rabbi Yitzhak Luria, based on the weekly Torah portion, superbly translated and explained by Rabbi Moshe Wisniewski.
Jim, like you, I wanted to say so much more yesterday. Jim,
Pardon?
like you, I wanted to say so much more yesterday during class, but I kept my mouth shut.
Well, you know,
It's just so much was touched on.
yeah, I know, and I was trying to hold my tongue, but a couple of times I had to respond to Richard at that point. I just couldn't not. That I should had to.
Even I mentioned, but it said they were, the second time. Well, and he didn't want to go there, but it said right there.
I know. But that's because we learned it in this class.
Yeah, I know.
I know.
Okay,
we're
ready?
actually, it was because of this class we were having a little difficulty last night.
Right.
But that's
Because of this class, you had difficulty last night.
Yes.
well, we're kind of advanced in some areas, and it was difficult to deal with some of the processes, but we were holding our tongues.
It was different than what you learned here, or it supported it?
Oh, it was, they were talking about, start off talking about when Adam and Chava were separated, it became two. And then it mentioned in there, for example, it said that the second time around for creating Chava. So I mentioned that Rabbi Wolf didn't want to go into it second time. What does that mean? But it said second time.
Okay.
So we glossed over some things because we
Okay.
knew what was
I've created some monsters here.
Well, then somebody started talking about how it should have been Eve, and
How what?
that Eve was first, and then Adam was taken from her rib, and this, that, and it was real political crazy. And I started to talk about back to back,
Yeah.
And then finally we got into back to back at the last part of the class.
Yeah.
And it was
There's a
good.
reason, there's a reason why this is,
Yes,
why it's not studied, widespread, everybody, for everybody.
believe me.
Okay,
Yeah.
so when
Right.
Avraham was 75 years old, Hashem told Avraham to leave his land, leave his birth and his father's house, and go to the land Hashem will show him. There Hashem will make him a great nation. Everyone translates it as his birthplace.
Mhm.
Moladcha, it means your birth, leave your birth. Means the
I'm sorry for
circumstance.
interrupting, but did we finish Noah?
Last week,
Yes.
Okay.
that ship has sailed, Rudy. You'll have to wait You'll have to wait 6 years to share whatever's on your mind.
I thought the ark has sailed. Okay.
The ark landed.
That ark has sailed.
No, the ark landed.
No, I think the ark is still sailing, but that's a
Okay, very good. So it doesn't, Moladcha does not mean your birthplace.
birth.
It means your birth.
Yeah.
We understand that it probably means the place where he's born, but he wasn't born there anyway.
Right.
He was in Haran. He was born in Ur.
Right.
Right. Rudy, were you in Ur?
No,
Okay. Someone was. I met a Solomon in the army, I think it was.
I was supposed to be in Iraq, but my wife wouldn't let me, so.
Okay. The
And you
divine,
listened. That's a
In
first.
this case, me, with life and death, yeah, I guess so.
the divine energy
I'll be
that
right.
maintains the world is a result of the relationship and interaction between Zeir Anpin and Nukva. That means it maintains the world, it keeps the world going. Their relationship depends on the deeds of man. What kind of relationship they're having. When the relationship is optimal, then divine energy flows strong and the world enjoys abundant good.
Mhm.
Okay. What do you think it's like now? At different times in history, the relationship has fluctuated also. It's not just a one-trick pony. It doesn't just have one way or two ways that they relate to each other, that they interact. There are different ways that Zeir Anpin and Nukva can interact.
Mhm.
So what we're going to talk here, and this is really what we're really going to talk here is how when Avraham came to Eretz Yisrael, then he changed how Zeir Anpin and Nukva interact.
Mhm.
It began to, there were the intellect began to be involved in the process. That is the bottom line that we're going to talk about. Until Abraham, Zeir Anpin and Nukva did not interact intimately, only superficially. A baby is overpowered by its emotions, such as when they cry or they want something very much, because they lack mental capacity to think rationally. As they grow older, they mature and their ability to think rationally develops. In Kabbalah terms, the fluid from the male begins in the mind. Therefore, the Kabbalistic mind must be developed for a proper relationship with Nukva to occur. We've had about developed and maturity. If there is no mind involved in this relationship, if there's no intellect involved, then the interaction is a very basic interaction. It's a superficial interaction. And he points out, he does very well, he points out here that, we're using the interaction between male and female to try to understand what's going on with Zeir Anpin and Nukva. This is the best idea we have to describe it.
And just
So-
go back to your number one. In your number one, here's an interesting twist. Today, President Trump signed the Abrahamic Treaty, and he is going to be turning 75 years old
When is he gonna be 75?
in June.
June. Hmm. Interesting.
Interesting. And I know that because he's a Gemini like me, so his birthday's in June.
Okay.
Just thought
Castor
that
and
was
Pol-
very interesting. Alan's twisting his kishkas a little bit, so that's.
Were,
Right.
were they Castor and Pollux? Gemini twins. Alan, who knows this? Were
What?
the Gemini twins at Castor and Pollux? You guys don't know?
No.
You don't know your whatever it is, Roman mythology or
Astrology?
no, it's not, it's really not astrology. Gemini is astrology.
Okay.
Gemini twins is a constellation. No, because I just read about them
Mythology.
yesterday.
I'm not up on mythology anymore.
There were two elephants in the zoo in Paris in I think 1871, and they were named Castor and Pollux. And
Oh,
I
I
think those
see.
are the Gemini twins. And they were at war with the Prussia and a few Wertheimer and 5 armies, I think, from the Germanic states. And there was nothing to eat, and Castor and Pollux suffered. They ended up feeding. They didn't make it through the war. They ended up feeding the population.
Oh,
Okay,
That's Babylonian astronomy.
you just looked it up?
Yeah, I just looked it up. Babylonian astronomy, the stars Castor and Pollux were known as the Great Twins.
Okay, see? So that's what we're gonna have first. This is the first idea. Okay, Alan,
yes.
you go first.
Alan.
Hashem said to Avram, because he hasn't his name changed yet, Hashem said to Avram, go forth from your land and from your birthplace and from your father's house to the land that I will show you. I will make you there into a great nation. Although Zer, Anpin, and Nukva are undergoing constant changes regarding their stage and state of development and union, these changes occur. Oh, sorry, I missed a part.
Hold on. You missed the. You
I
missed
just
the
said that. Yeah.
halfway
As we
point.
have explained in our
Which book do
exposition,
you have, Alan?
it's me. As we have explained in our exposition on the parts of Nukva, it has existed in various states of development and union with Zer Anpin from the time the world was created until the destruction of the Second Temple.
Right.
Although Zer Anpin and Nukva are undergoing constant changes regarding their stage and state of development and union, these changes occur in the context of specific time cycles or progressions. There is, for example, the daily cycle, the weekly cycle, the monthly cycle, and the yearly cycle, et cetera, et cetera. All the changing natures of these times, which occasion the various religious observances associated with them, prayer, Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh, holidays, etc., are caused by the changing states of development and coupling of these parts of them. Their Anpin is the male and Nukva is the female. Their coupling produces offspring in the form of the divine beneficence that grants existence and proper functioning of reality. The more developed and unified they are, the more the world and all worlds are in a state of heightened spiritual consciousness and harmonious productive functioning. The Arizal will now discuss the dynamics of the development and relationship of Zer Anpin and Nukva in the context of history.
Okay, back to the notes. Abraham began to make the world aware of Hashem. And the operative word is aware, because that up here, for the first time, the interaction of Zer Anpin and Nukva occurred on an intimate level. In other words, the word aware corresponds to the word intellect or knowledge. And therefore, the intellect is injected into Ze'er Anpin, or Ze'er Anpin and intellect relate to each other. We said before the example of a baby or of a human being, they mature and they develop their ability to their mental capacity. So this is seen in his original name, Avram. The first three letters spell Aver, which is the word for limb. And it in this case, it does refer to the male organ. We do find in places that it refers to the male organ specifically. The last letter is a closed mem, representing the female aspect. The final mem, the mem that's closed all around with the opening in the middle, with the opening in the middle. And so that's Avram, that Aver, representing the male principle, and the mem represents the closed mem represents the female principle, and that's why his that's shown in his name, Avram, of this new this new thing going on in the world, that Ze'er Anpin and Nukva are actually interacting in a more developed, mature way. Okay, we'll continue. Page, bottom of 57.
We will now discuss whether Ze'er Anpin and Nukva coupled before the era of the patriarchs or during their era. Before Avraham was born, Ze'er Anpin and Nukva did not couple, for in those days Ze'er Anpin was in the nursing stage and still consisted only of the 6 extremities. Mature intellect had not yet entered it, and as is known, the drop of male water, that is semen, can be elicited only from the mind. Therefore, there was until then no coupling of Ze'er Anpin and Nukva.
1 minute. The 6 spheros, ches of the emotions. That means not counting malchus, as chesed, gvura, tiferes, netzach, chon, yesod are 6, are also called the 6 extremities, or the 6 edges. If you think about, and it's the easy way to picture it, is the 6 sides of a cube. Cube has 6 sides. Those are the 6 spheros. We often talk about the 6 spheros either in a straight line, or we talk about them in the Sephirotic tree, right, left, center, right, left, center. But we can also picture them as 6 sides of a cube. And then the center would represent Malchus or represent Shabbos, the 7th day of the week. So it's like just another way of saying the 6 spheros. Okay, go ahead.
As Rabbi Wolf Ashkenazi points out, the Arizal is here referring to face-to-face coupling, since in order for the world to exist, there has to be at least some type of coupling, however superficial, between Ze'er Anpin and Nukva. By way of analogy, if a married couple are not attuned to each other, let's say because they are distracted by the exigencies of their careers or occupations, and their love for each other is very suppressed, they can still continue to keep their household running on automatic pilot, communicating on only the most superficial level. But life in this house during this period will certainly be dull, dreary, and somewhat oppressive. When their consciousness matures and they turn to each other in order to relate on a deeper level, the effect of this heightened type of relationship will spill over into all the elements that make up life in their home. In any case, until Avraham, Ze'er Anpin remained in the nursing stage, that is selfishly connected to Ima, concerned only with its own maturation process. There are 3 stages of consciousness: fetal consciousness, nursing consciousness, and intellectual consciousness. These are explained in greater detail elsewhere. The 6 extremities are the 6 spheros from Chesed to Yesod, which, as we know, are the raw material out of which the Partzuf of Zer Anpin is built. Its metamorphosis from these 6 separate spheros into a full-fledged Partzuf is marked by its acquisition of brains, that is, mature intellect in the form of the sub-spheros of Chachma, Bina, and Das. The intellect is what allows for a perspective higher than total self-orientation, for it is prepared to acknowledge the existence and value of other beings. Thus, only when a certain amount of brains has been acquired does a person become fertile. Sexual maturity is the indication of a deeper process, that of at least potential mental maturity, through which the individual should be prepared to behave in an intellectually and emotionally mature way toward another human being. On an allegorical level, all interactions are sexual in nature. Specifically, the presence of a female, that is recipient, to receive and reproduce his seminal essence can only inspire a person to couple with that female if he is mature enough to sense the value of propagating himself or his ideas for the benefit of the outside world.
Mhm.
Of course, on the absolutely physical level, all this ideal conceptualization of sexuality is subordinated to the Hashem-implanted nature of male-female mating instincts necessary for the survival of the species. Still, from the way things operate on an animal physical level, we can deduce, especially with the help of the Torah's insights, the way things are supposed to work spiritually.
So he's talking, I think what he's saying is that this is all about relationship. And any type of relationship, however, the relationship between male and female is physical, and it's not just emotional or intellectual, but it is a physical relationship, and therefore it's the most perhaps vivid, graphic relationship that there is, and that can and therefore might be the most descriptive of the relationship between Zeir Anpin and Nukva. Any comments? Any comments on what I just said?
Yeah,
How
I
about
think
the end? How about the end of the other paragraph? The intellect is what allows for a perspective higher than total self-orientation.
well, I think that's the key. The point is that yes, we have this physical process, but even the physical process gains in its refinement the more that the intellectual and intellectual, by intellectual, I think what's really important is not just the ima part of the intellectual, but the chachma part of the intellectual, and ima and das, and taking it even deeper than that from Keser, when that flow through chachma, bina, das is involved, and the intellect affects Zeir Anpin, and Zeir Anpin matures, and Nukva as well. The flow is much more unified and conscious of others and not self-involved. When Ima is or Bina is the origin, and you don't have the real face-to-face relationship, but more back-to-back, you have an egocentric form of relationship, which can function, but does not involve what I think is real coupling and real, both in a, and this can be looked at from a physical level to a higher level, a social level, an interactive level with other human beings, and a worldly level, and ultimately our relationship to Hashem. So the more that we can tap in, or it's tapped in through Abraham, of course, with where it's brought forth, the energy flow from the higher plane, and not coming only from self-consciousness, but other consciousness and a unified consciousness, the better we have the world. I think what's also fascinating is that we are currently in a, when it talks about the stages of maturation, that Zeir Anpin remained in the nursing stage that is selfishly connected to Ima, which is a significant reflection of where we are today in societal process, at least in terms of the things that are going on that are that we've just been speaking about.
Well, it's the whole maturation process, just like the fact of what you see every day when people haven't reached that maturation and they're not interacting the way they should interact, but is basically back to back and not front to front.
Yeah,
They don't have the ability to communicate, and therefore the desire to go beyond what's superficial and just exist. And that's not the way we have to be.
yeah. It's really incredible that some historic, earth-shattering event takes place today, and it's perceived by some folks as a distraction. It just blows my mind. It just blows my mind. But that's another piece. But it's it blows my mind that people can block a hospital room where officers have been shot and scream for their death. To me, that's
Deny them treatment.
denying them treatment and wanting them to be harmed.
Right.
It's how are we not in a selfish or in a fetal or even nursing consciousness when we excuse that? My goodness, it's just awful.
What do those two things, that the signing of the Abraham Accords
Yeah.
and the hospital, what's the connection to what we're discussing here? Can you elaborate?
Yes. So the signing of the Abrahamic Accords is to me a maturation of intellect, where beneficence is flowing, certainly from Kesser through Chachma and Bina and Das, and moving through the emotions, and moving through Nukva, and resulting, the offshoot, the product is this amazing accord that takes place and unites Abrahamic progeny. The other side of it is to see two police officers who are minding their own business ambushed by somebody out of pure anger and
Little regard for humanity.
stupidity, and almost in a fetal kind of consciousness, like a child kicking, and then when people are supporting or are when people are blocking health to be given to these officers, to me that's a continuation of the fetal process. And then when politicians say, or news or media folks say, oh my goodness, there is no violence on the street and everything is protests and it's the whatever white supremacist fault or whatever nonsense is come up with, and don't see that to me is a nursing intellectualism. That is someplace that is where there is no deep consciousness of otherness. It's more self-centered and non-connected with a rational and deeper consciousness of otherness in the world. So that's how I see those two things.
Okay, thanks for explaining, clarifying. And while you're saying that, I was checking CNN, and I scroll down, and I scroll down, and I scroll down, and I scroll down, and finally, somewhere
They're
near the
talking about
bottom,
COVID. That's
there's
all
a picture. There's a picture of Jared Kushner, and in the small print, they have that the two Gulf nations recognize Israel.
Yeah, they prefer to just continue talking about COVID.
And then that they disregarded the COVID precautions during the signing. That's their story, the signing.
Yeah. There's a so that's the nursing consciousness. I'm going back to
I
the
think
consciousness on the crowd rather than the merit of what's going on.
I think they're gonna wake up and find that they're out of touch with America.
Well,
I don't know. I don't know. I hope so.
I find this.
So I want to, yeah, thank you. You did explain. You explained very well. What do we mean a relationship where intellect is involved? What does that mean? So you could have and you imagine it, you picture it, where let's say a husband and wife are able to discuss the the news, and they're on the same page. They're able to discuss the news or the work that one of them is doing, which involves something scientific, and they're able to discuss that at home, and they both enjoy. They're on the same page intellectually. I guess that's one thing. But when we talk about Hasidus, when we talk about intellect, as far as for people, we're talking about a rational process where the person has an interest in something, and this triggers their intellect, and they begin to study this, or they begin to plan for it, and then that has an effect on their emotions and how they feel. This is a working process, or this is a process that works. It's a healthy process. You decide that let's say, to stop smoking, or to give up. What did I say? Smoking?
Yeah.
To give up smoking, or you decide you need to go on a diet, or you decide that you're gonna,
drinking,
what?
give up drinking.
Give up drinking, or that you're gonna decide that you should have a 6x10 garden in your yard. Okay, it comes from it starts with something that interests you. I'd like to do this. What do you do next? Then, if it's done properly, you go to do research. You buy a book. You look up on the internet. Or you study and to see to help you. What are the benefits of giving up smoking? What are the benefits of losing weight? You make a plan. How do I go about this? So that you're convinced intellectually that this is the right thing, and you make the plan of how to do it. And then you get excited. Or you get excited about it as far as, let's say, giving up smoking or going on a diet. It gives you the support, gives you the encouragement you need. It gives you the stamina, the drive. It gives you the drive to stick with it. That's the emotions that you feel about it. And then you can put your plan into action. So the intellect is something which that you're able to connect with an idea that will have an effect on how you feel about it, and then you can implement it. And that's what we're talking. So I'm thinking, as we're reading about this, to relate intellectually to another person doesn't just mean that you can discuss the baseball stats together, or that you can discuss I don't know, theory of relativity or something like that. But it means you have an intellectual, or you have a rational, logical foundation for the relationship itself. So that, for example, you say, if I ask my wife when she's doing the laundry, I know she's going to get upset with me, for example. So that's understanding being aware of the relationship and making sure not to say that, making sure that it doesn't come out of your mouth, something like that. So what I'm saying is something that relates to it's an intellectual, logical perception of the relationship, and that you know what to say and what not to say, so that the other person isn't hurt, and the other person knows what to say and what not to say, so that you're not hurt. And more than that is that you build up trust, so much trust that you could say something, and I'm going to say your wife, and here we're all guys, so I'm going to say where you have so much trust, where your wife tells you about something that you're doing wrong, and you're not insulted. You're able to say, "Oh, thanks," or your wife points out a mistake that you made. "Oh, you spelled this word wrong," or
you don't react. You don't react. You're quiet.
no, I'm talking. That's for you, but there's so much trust that you really appreciate. You're not insulted. You're not hurt, and you're
Yeah.
able to do that. You're able to do that without any hard feelings, because you might go and say, "Will you look this over for me? Check to make sure there are no mistakes. Check to make sure I didn't make." And if they find something, then you honestly, then you're not hurt or anything, because you have this great trust, and there's so much support, so much of the time, that you're able to do this. You don't feel vulnerable when you point out something negative, or there's some type of criticism. So I think that's what it means to have, on a relationship level of people, to have a intellect involved. Okay. What time? We're at 16. 58 at the bottom. Jim, would you like to continue? Oh,
Sure.
hold on. Let me go to here. 4. Okay. I did this with Aver, and yeah, he has a lot of explanation here, and a lot of it I skipped. So we're now going to go to number 4. I already read. Jim, 58 at the bottom.
58 at the bottom. So when Abraham was born, there started to be above an arousal toward the supernal coupling of Zeranpin and Nukva. This is why he was named Avram. For this name alludes to the coupling of Yesod of Zeranpin, known as Lim, ever, with the Yesod of its Nukva, known as the final Mem. As the Midrash states, Avraham was blessed from a very young age with the ability to see through the sham of idolatry that was prevalent in his time, and a concomitant urge to seek the truth about the world and its relationship with God. Inasmuch as our actions in this world influence the dynamics of the upper worlds, this consciousness raising prepared the way for the reunion of God and his creation, respectively personified in the Partsafim of Zeranpin and Nukva. Avram is spelled Aleph, Beit, Resh, Mem. The first three letters spell the word for limb. The last letter, the final, Mem. The limb refers to the male sexual organ, which corresponds to the Yesod of Zeranpin. The final closed Mem refers to the virginal female sexual organ. Avram's name thus alluded to the union of these two principles.
Okay, thank you. Then he says, it was only when Avram reached Israel, that's at the age of 75, that the interaction actually occurred. The Gemara states that the era of Israel makes a person wise. So it refers to the development of supernal intellect.
Mm-hmm.
When Hashem said, I will make you a great nation, the word great refers to Zeranpin growing up by receiving supernal intellect. I'm going to change that to maturing. Okay. By receiving supernal intellect. So Hashem said, I'll make you a great nation. Great meaning to become the mature intellect that we've been speaking about. Okay, Go ahead.
Nevertheless, the supernal coupling did not actually occur until Abraham went to the land of Israel. Only then was he able to effect supernal coupling. Because the spiritual nature of the land of Israel is conducive to God consciousness, Abraham was only able to achieve the level of consciousness required to influence the dynamics of the Partsafim only once he was there.
Okay, in Israel. Number 6, one way to understand the Sfirot is that the feminine principle is how something is expressed, while the male principle is the content or message that is being expressed. Zeranpin, male principle is the content. Thought and speech and action too are the way ideas are expressed. Thought is expressed privately only for the person. Speech is expressed publicly for others. We've mentioned elsewhere that thought is called Leah and speech is called Rachel. Until Avram came to Israel, Zeranpin was directed downward towards Malchus, the level called Rachel. But once in Israel, Avram triggered Zeranpin to interact with the intellect, the expression of thought called Leah. I'm going to trigger Zeranpin upward to interact with the intellect, the expression of thought called Leah. One moment. Okay. Go ahead.
This is the mystical meaning of God's command to Abraham, go forth from your land and from your birthplace, from your father's house to the land that I will show you, and I will make you there into a great nation. When he went to the land of Israel, he caused their Anpin to develop and to mature into a level of intellectual consciousness. It could then couple with its nukva. Our sages state that the air of the land of Israel makes one wise. Thus, the maturation of consciousness that the land of Israel induces in an individual is specifically that of intellect.
Okay, go ahead.
It follows that until this mature mentality entered Zer Anpin, the partzif of Leah was not revealed. This is because Leah emerges from Zer Anpin only as a radiance of his mentality as is known. Therefore, until then, all that was revealed was the partzif of Rachel, which is known as the lower land. Jacob's two wives, Leah and Rachel, personify the two parts of him that develop as nukva or feminine correlate of Zer Anpin. Specifically, know that Malchus in general is the principle of expression or medium, as opposed to Zer Anpin, which is the content of the expression or the message within the medium. We also know there are three modes of expression: thought, speech, and action. Action in terms of consciousness is more removed from the person than thought and speech. Thought and speech are literally expression of the idea in the person's head, voiced in mental thought patterns or in words. Action is not as literal. One person can sometimes deduce another's ideas and philosophies from what he does, and to that extent, action is an expression of idea, but is not nearly as literal and exact as thought and speech. Action, of course, has its own advantage over thought and speech and is in some ways more eloquent, but that does not change the fact that it is less literal than the higher forms of expression. The difference between thought and speech on one hand and action on the other is seen in the form of the letter He, which signifies expression. Colon. The connected upper and right lines correspond to thought and speech, whereas the disconnected left line corresponds to action. In any case, thought and speech are the two initial and primary forms of expression, and Malchus develops a separate partzif for each. Leah is the partzif of thought. Rachel is the partzif of speech. Evidently, Abraham could appreciate or achieve divine consciousness that is spoken into the world, but could not relate to divine thought until he reached the land of Israel. Only when he did achieve mental consciousness of God, and this produced thought.
Okay, thanks.
Hence Leah.
Towards Leah, upwards. Instead of going downwards towards Rachel, going upwards towards Leah.
Right.
And now we're going to say, okay, Hashem said, go for yourself from your land, from the circumstance of your birth, and from your father's house to the land that I will show you. So we have four things here: from your land, from your birth, from your father's house, and to the land. Abraham personified Chesed. Chachma, Chesed, and Netzach are three sefirot on the right side, all corresponding to benevolence, or all containing the property of Chesed. From your land means to leave Malchus and to rise up to Netzach, which is near Malchus. From your birth means to rise up to Chesed, and from your father's house means to rise up to Chachma.
Mm-hmm.
To the land I will show you is the upper land, as opposed to Malchus, which is the lower land, which is the level called Leah. Avraham can only reach this level when intellect is developed. That means that Zer Anpin interacts with the intellect, which is above it. It reaches upwards towards the female component of the intellect, I guess, towards Bina. Okay. And here I'm writing much shorter than what they write in the book. Okay, so 60.
Since Abraham's ascent occurs on the right axis of the Sephirah tree, it is said of him,
I want to go back
forth.
a little. Did you read before? Thus the meaning?
Oh,
Oh, I'm sorry. Thus, the meaning of go forth from your land is that Abraham is to ascend higher than the consciousness of the lower land, which is the parts of Racha. Since Abraham's ascent occurs on the right axis of the Sephirah tree, it is said of him, go forth from your land, meaning the Sephirah of Netzach at the bottom of this axis, which is closest to Malchut, which is called your land, as is stated. Each of the three patriarchs personified one of the three axes on the array of Sephiroth. Abraham personified the axis of Chesed, loving kindness. So you have left axis, which is Isaac, center axis Jacob, right axis Abraham. So the Keser is underneath Jacob, Chachma is under Abraham, Bina is under Isaac, Chesed's under Abraham, Das is under Jacob. It's not numbered, but it's there. Gevurah is under Isaac, Teferach is under Jacob, Netzach is under Abraham, Hod is under Isaac, Yesod and Malchus are under Jacob. The lowest station of this axis is the Sephirah of Netzach.
On the right
On
side.
the right side. It doesn't say that, but of the right axis, I guess. So, the lowest station of Abraham's axis. The structural array of the Sephirot enables us to understand certain aspects of their interrelationships. We note there are three triads here: Hakma Bina Das, Chaver Agur Chesed, Netzach Hod Yesod. The role play of each right member, left member, and center member of the triads is similar to the corresponding member of the other triads. In our case, Chachma, Chesed, Netzach, our right members are male principles relative to the respective members. In this sense, Netzach can be considered a projection of Chesed onto the plane of active relationship. Chesed can be considered a projection of Chachma into the plane of emotion and so forth. So then we have, he ascended to Chesed, which is referred to in the verse as your birthplace. Chesed is called birthplace because any drop of fertile seed is from Chesed, which is hidden in the mouth of Ima, as is known. Although we said above the intellect is a prerequisite for procreation, this does not, of course, negate the additional necessity of attraction or ideally love. In fact, if the intellect is functioning properly, there are no obstructions. It will naturally produce the emotional response appropriate to intellectual understanding, Ima. In this case, appreciation for the rectification of reality accomplished by being fruitful and multiplying one's divine self through reality, and the essential role played by the female in this process will bring the individual to appreciate, to be attracted to, and love the female. He then ascended further from your birthplace, Chesed to Chachma, which is referred to in the verse as your father's house, because Chachma is the father of Abraham, who personified Chesed. Chachma is situated above Chesed on the Sephirah tree. It is the source of Chesed. Just as Chachma is the male principle of the intellect, Chesed is the male principle of the emotions.
And also, Avram's name begins with Av. Av, the father, is another name for Chachma. What's that word? Not name, not moniker. Moniker for Chachma. Okay, whatever. Another name for Chachma is Av.
Pseudonym?
Perhaps. Okay. And go on.
Once Zer Ampen's mentality of Chachma has been developed, Abraham is commanded to go, this is the fourth piece, to the land that I will show you. This refers to Leah, the supernal land, which only then becomes visible and revealed, and not before the development of the intellect is mentioned. I
Okay,
think it's very important though, and this is what I was saying before, which is where I hear you about trust. That's a whole different story. But what is very important and something to really talk about at some point, but is that the development of the intellect really has to reach back to Chachma. It can't be lost or begin with Bina. It has to go farther. It has to go back to Chachma, which Abraham teaches us.
how? What do you mean? Explain.
Well, I think that there has to be the flash, the inspiration, the connection with Kesser for any thought to have some deep maturity. And if it doesn't, if it's just more of an analytical process or an intellectualizing process, the intellect doesn't develop. It's almost a supernal process of rationality that needs to be instilled into the intellectual process that I'm talking about.
Okay.
Okay, that's what I'm saying. And if we lose that, then we lose touch with this process.
Okay. I really appreciate how the class, how you guys make such connections to what goes on, to real life.
Yeah, well,
There's a further connection with Chabad, Chachma Bina Das, and the statement that Hashem says to Abraham, "Go to the land that I will show you." So he leaves his land of his birth. Hashem doesn't tell him, take a left, take a right, go through that forest. He just says,
Go.
go to the land that I will show you.
mhm.
Meaning that Abraham had such belief in Hashem that he knew that through the course of events, he would ultimately wind up to where Hashem wanted him to go. So he had that spark that light bulb moment, and was able to convert that into a belief and thereby an understanding. And it just, to me, it kind of synthesizes, and I just kind of thought about it for the first time, that statement, go to the land that I will show you, encapsulates Chachma Bina Das. And also speaks to this awareness that Abraham brought into the world of Hashem.
Right. There has to be consciousness of Hashem for the intellectual process to really work.
It makes it so much more alluring and mystical and spiritual when you think about it in that way, as opposed to Hashem saying, okay, here's the map, right? You're going to go down a mile here, take a right, follow that river, go over this
Wadi.
Wadi, exactly. But he didn't say that. He says, go to the land that I will show you. It's just,
They're beautiful.
beautiful. It's beautiful.
Very beautiful. Very, very nice, guys.
Okay.
So happy birthday again, Chaim. Should be your best year yet.
Okay, going off live?
Huh? No, I'll
Yeah, go off live.
Morning.
to say, like, yeah, you keep going uphill till you're 60. And after that, it's all like downhill. It's like coasting on a bicycle.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Really?
We appreciate that.
I'm thinking I'm going to go even further.
It's like easy cycling.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Coasting.
Posting.
Okay, we're not done yet. Let me see if I can stop